Hi, this is Shancy with the Sales and Support team with HomeGauge, and today we're going to talk about your agreement or your contract. Putting your agreement in the software, using it to use the online click agreement, and distributing that to your customer. So initially, we're going to start out with using one of our sample agreements in the software. If you have an agreement you'd like to use, we're going to show you how to incorporate that if you'd like to. But initially, we're going to use a sample of ours. So if you want to use a sample of an agreement in our software, at the top of the screen, you would click on Office. This is where there's several different documents. I will say that if you're going to use one of our samples, be sure that you have it checked out by an attorney. They're just samples. It doesn't mean they're good for everyone, and each state has different requirements when it comes to a contract. At the top of the screen, you'll click on Office and go down to Edit Report Docs. There are several documents in here, and I'm just going to pick one of the samples we have, the agreement sample. Let's just say sample 1, and I'll say OK. So when we first open that, you'll notice that there's all these instructions at the beginning. So really, we need to remove those. These instructions are for you as the home inspector. Basically tells you what we will and won't do as far as helping you with this and what steps you need to take. I'm going to actually get rid of these instructions because clearly we don't want them in the contract. And even these little lines here, I'm going to get rid of. Okay, so once that's finished, you have just the content of the agreement. But what we really need is for this content to be in a file called disclaim. That's because the software knows that if you only have one agreement, and most people only have one, that if it's in the disclaim file, it'll automatically use it for you, and you'll never have to attach your agreement to the report. So I need to get this file, instead of having it called Agreement Sample 1, I want it to be called Disclaim. So at the top of this little screen right here, I'm going to use the floppy disk with the plus sign, and this is the Save As button so that I can save this as Disclaim. There's already a disclaim file in here, so I'm not going to type in disclaim. I'm just going to scroll to the right until I see disclaim. You'll notice when I highlight it, it shows up down here, the file name. And now I will just click OK. And it says, hey, disclaim already exists. You want to override it? Why, yes, I do. Now you'll see at the top of this little screen, now the file is called disclaim. So let's look at a few things in the body of this agreement. Number one, you'll see that there's some funky language. Like for this, for example, it says asterisk report info dot inspector company, and this one says asterisk report info dot inspector asterisk. These are called merge fields, and what that does is it will read content from your HomeGauge license or from a report in which you're working to auto-populate this document. This means that you'll never have to go into this screen again and type in your customer's name or the property address or whatever. You can then just incorporate different merge fields to fill in that information for you. Those merge fields are actually already in this screen. You just have to know where they live. So let's find a place where we would want to incorporate some information. So there's a whole bunch of stuff down here. And down here, it actually has something for the address, but a lot of guys like to have the address at the top of the screen. So I'm going to come up here and put my cursor actually right here at the beginning of this paragraph. And I know that this document kind of looks like a normal, text document, but it's actually kind of fancier. So you do want to be careful in the way of formatting in here. And I prefer to use some tools on the screen as opposed to using your enter key when you want to do something. So I put my cursor here at the beginning of the paragraph. And instead of using my enter key, I'm going to use this double arrow pointing to the left that would give me a paragraph break. Kind of gave me a little extra space, so now I can put my cursor there. And this is similar to a regular document in the way that you can do certain things like center it or color it, things like that. So I'm going to use this little center justification button to bring this information to the center so that the customer's name and the address to the property will show up at the beginning of the agreement. So now that I have my cursor in the middle of the screen, I'd like to incorporate my customers' names at the beginning. So I'm going to use this drop-down menu right here. It says Insert Merge Field over here. Insert Merge Field. And when you click this drop-down here, it basically gives you choices. The choices are pretty clear as to what they'll do, but instead of putting those words into the paragraph, it will actually incorporate the merge field that needs to be used to incorporate that information. So I'm going to click the drop down, and what I would like is for all of my clients' names to show up on one line at the top of my document. So I'll click this All Clients Full Names one line, and it puts that merge field there, okay? I'm going to use this double arrow again, and now I'm going to incorporate the address. So I'll return to the drop-down menu, and now what I'm looking for is for the property address or the inspection address. So if I scroll down, and you'll notice this is in alphabetical order. So I have a few options. This is report full address or report full address one line. So you might use the one line feature if you were incorporating the address in a paragraph form, but I'm just going to pick the report full address because that'll be more like an envelope. Okay. So let's say I've incorporated all the merge fields here. There's a few already at the bottom. So this has like the customer's names, and here's the inspector information, the date of the report, and the price. So you even can incorporate at the bottom here, there's like a price feature. It says report info.price. That means that whatever I fill out my invoice for, it'll put the total down there. So let's say I went through and I've put in all the merge fields that I want to. As a side note, using the online click agreement does not actually put a signature on the document. You can leave the lines for where a customer might sign, only if you need to print, if you had to print up one and bring it to the inspection. They won't sign on the line. When they look at the online click agreement, they're just going to click a button that says I agree. But on the chance you should need to print it up, it doesn't hurt to leave the lines. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to close this screen. And when I do that, it's asking me if I want to save the file. Yes, I do. Now I have saved the contract or the agreement in a specific location in the disclaim file in my software. So let's start a report. So I've put my customer's name, and I'm going to put the email address. So I've put my customer's name and the email address, and in order for them to use the online click agreement, I need to create a username for them. So because I'm logged into my software the way I would be anytime like to upload a report, the software can now communicate with my HomeGauge services. So I'm going to click on Create HG Username because my customer is going to need information to access this document. I'll click that. This is in my contacts list already because I use that customer name all the time. I will leave this field blank, and when I say OK, it will create a username for my customer, or if there's one on file already with that email address, it'll use the one on file with us. And here's my customer. OK. I also have to put in the report information. So when you're using the online click agreement, I think it's important to use a report ID. This means that if you have multiple documents that you distribute based on one inspection report, it might be an inspection, an agreement, maybe even the summary is separate or the invoice, it makes it easier for these documents to find each other once they get to the HomeGauge dashboard. Because really, if it's all one inspection, all those documents should live together. I like to use the date and the first name and the address. Okay. And I'll come down here and I will fill all this information out. This is the property address. Okay. Now, I've filled out everything that I need. Oh, actually, I need to do my invoice. So let's click on Miscellaneous on the left-hand side. Let's just fill out an invoice so that you can see how that little merge fields with the total works. And I will click on the Invoice tab at the top here. So I have several options here. I'm just going to grab one. Let's say the house is just over 2,000 square feet. When I click in the left-hand side here, a little X shows up next to the item that I'm going to use. And you'll notice that it totals out my invoice here at the bottom. That information will be reflected on my agreement. So just as a point, I'm going to click on Attachments over here. You see how you can attach an agreement here? You don't ever have to do that unless you have multiple agreements. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. But if you only have this one agreement, you will never attach an agreement here. So now that I've done this, let's have a look at our agreement. Right now, I'm just going to go to Print just to show you. I know I haven't answered all the questions because I haven't even picked a template yet, so that's okay. I can just say yes. So here's my document list. This is not the full report. This is the agreement. So I'm going to uncheck Full Report for Upload or Print with Pictures and put a check mark next to Pre-Inspection Agreement Only. When I do that, the Pre-Inspection Agreement Only knows that if I have content in that disclaim file, and I haven't told it to do otherwise, it's going to read that agreement that we just put in there. So I'm going to uncheck Full Report, and I'll check off Pre-Inspection Agreement. So you'll notice at the top here that it filled out my customer's name because I filled out the report. It put the property address. And when I scroll to the bottom, you'll see that total right down here. And it has my inspector's name. It has the date of the inspection. All right, so it has all this information. I don't have to go in here and fill this out every time. I'm going to fill out the information for my report anyway. So the less you have to retype information, the less likely you will make a typo. So use the merge fields. By all means, use them. So now I'm just going to close this out. So that's how you incorporate a sample, one of the sample agreements that we have. But let's say that you have an agreement that you already want to use. Okay, so if that agreement might be in Word or it might be in a PDF, as long as you can copy and paste the content out of there, you can use it in HomeGauge. You cannot just use it in its current format. You need to get that content into that disclaim file because the file called disclaim and all those other documents in that list, they're special documents. They are in HTML really, even though they look like they're just plain old, they're not. They can do all those awesome things with the merge fields because they're better than a regular document. That being said, you need to be able to copy and paste out of there. You also need to take the content from the agreement in whatever format you currently have it in, and you need to paste it into something like Notepad. So I'll show you how to do that. So currently I just have this regular document called My Agreement. I'll double click on it. I actually have it in WordPad, but it typically would be in Word or something like that. So what I need to do here is I need to highlight all this information and copy it into Notepad. Notepad comes with every Windows operating system. It's a really basic word processing program. It's not fancy at all, and that's what we want because even though this document looks plain, it actually has some stuff going on in the background that allows it to kind of have a different font and to highlight things, and it actually does a lot more than, it's not a word processing program. It's just a little bit fancier. The reason we want to put it into Notepad and get rid of all that fanciness is because when we paste it into HomeGauge, we want that special document in HomeGauge to be able to do what it's told without interference. It'll probably work just fine if you copied it directly from Word, but you would find yourself with font inconsistencies. And, you know, that just doesn't look professional. You need to have it nice and neat and clean. Your agreement is an extraordinarily important document, and honestly, you just want it to be nice and smooth. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select everything in here. Actually, there's an icon up here for select all. So I'm going to highlight everything, or you can drag and highlight everything. And I'll use my right-click feature, and I'm going to copy. Okay, now I'm going to close out this document. On Windows 8, you can find Notepad by putting your cursor up at this top right corner. Actually, where is it right now? Why isn't it there? Well, I'm not sure why that's not popping up, but let me go to this window down here. I'm going to go to the search icon and I'll type in Notepad. As soon as I start typing in Note, it comes up. So I'll click on Notepad. And when I paste this in here, it's going to look so plain, and it's not going to look anything like this when we get it back into HomeGauge, but I'll right click and paste, and it just looks like this really plain document. Once I get it in here, I need to select it all again, right click and select all, and right click and copy. I'll minimize this just for speed. And now I'll open HomeGauge software. Now on my invisible clipboard on my computer is this text that we just copied. I need to go into that disclaim file. So I'm going to come back up here to Office the way we did at the beginning and go down to Edit Report Docs. I'll scroll to the right until I find the disclaim file, highlight it, and go down to OK. So right now I have the content of the document we were in earlier. So I'm going to highlight it all and delete it so I have nothing in there. Now I can right click and paste, and the content of the other document that I wanted to use is in here. But there's a few things I need to change. Number one, well, it actually has the date hard typed in here. I don't need that date hard typed in there because that means every time I try to distribute this document, it's going to say April 18th, 2015. What I need to do is put a merge field in there for the date. In HomeGauge, there's two options for the date. One is for the date the inspection is actually done. The other is today's date. So typically, you would be distributing your agreement before you go out to the site. So I think we should use today's date. So what I'll do is I'm just going to highlight April 18th, 2015, all the way to the end here. And I'm going to use my merge field. So I'm going to the drop down at the top of the screen. And if you scroll down, actually I want to say this is all the way at the bottom because it's in alphabetical order, we'll come to today's date. So if I click there, it is going to put the merge field in replacement. It's going to replace the highlighted text that I have with the proper merge field for the date. Okay. Because I started a report and I've started to put information in it, I can preview what this looks like right now by clicking on this little wrench right here. It'll start to show me, when I click on that wrench, it'll show me any content that I've put in my report based on the merge field I've used. So you can just kind of peek at it real quick. You'll notice it says September 8th, 2015. So I will click on the wrench again, and you'll notice it says my name here. Well, I really don't need to have my name there. I should use a merge field for my name. I know that doesn't seem important on the surface, but the reason it's important is we all hope that, we're going to grow our businesses and be big and huge and be able to share this information to some of our employees who we may have hired. Well, I don't want to share my content of my agreement with an employee that has my name in it. I want it to have their name on it. So if I had to share this, I'd rather the merge field to be there so that if the inspector puts it in their software, it will read their name from their HomeGauge license, because each inspector has to have their own HomeGauge software license. So I'm going to highlight my name, and I'll go to the drop-down again. Now, if I go to the eyes for inspector, let's see, inspector company, inspector contact, inspector name. So it says report info.inspector. If I click on that little wrench one more time, see it says Shancy Marie again. But if I click on the wrench again, you can see it has the merge field. It's putting my name in there because I activated my HomeGauge license with Shancy Marie as my name. So I would come through here and add anything I wanted, okay? I would want to add the property address probably, that type of thing. Anything you want to incorporate. So you'd go through and add as many merge fields as you see fit. And at the bottom here, you can leave the lines if you care to, or you can edit it. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is. When I go to close out here, it is going to ask me if I want to save the file. Yes, I do. So I have my customer's name, I've created a username, I have a report ID and an address, and I've modified my agreement to meet my needs. So if I go up here to print real quick, I have my pre-inspection agreement only checked off. I'll say OK. And here is the date and my name, and if I incorporated other things in here, it would be here. So this is going to be specific. So maybe I've decided, oh, I need to put the property address in here. I can hit close, return to Office at the top of the screen, and now I'm going to go back into this claim file, edit report docs, and disclaim. So maybe I want to add some stuff to the beginning here and throw in the address and the customer's name. So I'm going to put my cursor at the very beginning of the paragraph, kind of like we did on the other one. Okay, and I'm going to use this double arrow pointing to the left to give me some space at the top of the document. Okay, and there's my cursor, and I will use the center justification again like I did before, and maybe I'll give it a name. I can highlight it if I want to, make it bold. Okay, and I'll make that center justified again. Whoops, that's why it's sensitive. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to incorporate my customer's name. I'll use the drop down and go to all clients' full names. I'll use the double arrow again, and I'll use the drop down, and I'll scroll down to report full address. Okay, now if I wanted to, I could, put other information on here, but I'm going to leave it at that. I'll close out, and yes, I will save my changes. So now if I go to print, I know I haven't even picked a template. Pre-inspection agreement only, and here's all my customers' information and the address. Those merge fields are really useful. And now I'll close that out. So let's say for some reason I have an alternate agreement. Okay, so right now we've initially been talking about just one agreement, and most inspectors use just one agreement. But if you do a variety of different types of inspections, you might find yourself wanting to incorporate different contracts. So in Florida, for example, inspectors have to do, 4 points and wind mits, and this is so that people can get insurance for the property that they purchase. And maybe there's a special agreement for that type of inspection. So typically I use the agreement that I put in already, but now I find myself needing to do a 4-point inspection, and I need to override my standard agreement with an agreement that's appropriate for a 4-point inspection. And if I want to do that, I would come over here to the miscellaneous section of my report. Now I will use the agreement. Optional if you use your own agreement. Actually, I don't know why it says that, because it just should be for alternate agreements. You can have your own agreement in there, but maybe you have an alternate agreement. So I'm going to override the agreement that I added to disclaim with a different agreement, just for this one report. And I'll use this attach agreement button right over here. If you only have one agreement, you will never do this. Attach agreement. So it brings me to this file on my computer that's in the HomeGauge file. It's called HTML5. And I'm just going to find one in here. Here's a 4-point agreement, 4-point. And when I open it, it's going to pop up this little agreement about 4 points, has the customer's name already, and has this HomeGauge is actually the inspector's company name. And it's showing me that it's about to override my standard agreement with this one. It's just previewing it so I know that I'm doing it. And if I wanted to, at the bottom, I could print it out if I care to. But I'm just going to close it at the bottom of the screen. And now you can see that there is a 4-point agreement overriding my standard agreement. If I go to print or upload now, and use that same print option we've been using, it will show me that 4-point because I overrode my standard agreement. I'll close that out. Now if I say, oh no, I didn't mean to override that 4-point, override my standard agreement with that 4-point, I need my standard agreement back. Well, all I have to do is click remove agreement right here. And now it's gone. And if I go to print or upload and use that same print option, there's my other agreement again. So you can override your standard agreement with alternate agreements if you care to, or you can just use one agreement that has all of the stuff that you normally inspect, and it's really kind of up to you. So now we have this agreement that needs to be distributed to the customer. So what I want to do is I'm going to upload that agreement and send off a report, an online click agreement email to my customer. I'm going to go to upload now instead of print. I'll keep the pre-inspection agreement only checked off. And here's my agreement, so I can just kind of see it, make sure it looks good. And now I will click upload at the bottom of the screen. We're using HomeGauge services right now to distribute this. The only way you can use the online click agreement is if you have a HomeGauge services account with us. It is an optional service in addition to your software. So now it's asking me, do I want to send my report notification emails or my agreement notification email? I can say yes. And as soon as I do this, it's going to navigate us from the software to the internet on my HomeGauge dashboard.